Hey guys, Katie Cleaver here with Mac Cleaver back here. We wanted to go over a few tips for nursing school exams. They're really frustrating and difficult to kind of navigate, so I wanted to give you some very practical tips on how to get through kind of nursing exams. And I wrote down some notes. I'm going to pull those up so I can go over them. Okay, very practical, extremely practical, but eat well, sleep well, and make sure you've prepared. So it's really hard to be at the top of your game with an exam if you're exhausted. And if you've prepared appropriately, meaning, I have, allocated appropriate time to study so that I wasn't staying up all night to get stuff done, if that makes sense. Make sure you eat something before. It is really hard for me to focus if I am hungry. So I encourage you to eat something before the exam so you're not focusing on the tummy grumblies, So get a good night's sleep, make sure you've studied appropriately, and then eat something before the exam. And also, it's nice to have like a water bottle with you, or coffee or something like that. That's really nice to have if you can have that. Okay, so that's very practical. Let's talk with the exam in front of you. So sometimes you'll have exams over things where you had to memorize things, that were difficult to kind of put the pieces together, and you just kind of are like trying to hold that information in and hope you have a question on it and try to recall that information. My advice is, especially if it's something very straightforward, is once you get that exam, write it at the top of the paper immediately. That way, when you're going through the exam, you're not trying to recall that information and not potentially confusing it and twisting it and whatever. Before you even look at any questions, maybe if you're trying to differentiate between aortic stenosis versus regurgitation, or, those kinds of things, or where the heart sounds are, and Erb's point, what is that, or what different lung sounds can mean, or normal lab values, those kinds of things that are very black and white, straightforward, that you can quickly jot at the top of the test, so that if you have a question about that, you can just refer to that, know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's the right answer. So I highly recommend doing that if it's an exam over information like that, which a lot of exam questions or nursing school exams are over black and white stuff like that. Have coffee. It's really helpful. What I would tend to do until I figured this out was I would get the whole exam and just immediately be overwhelmed because of all these questions, and I'd see words and things. Oh, I know I don't know that one. I know I don't know that one. So I encourage you to take a piece of paper and cover up all of, take one question at a time. So covering up, and this is given if you're taking exams that are written, but covering up the questions so that eyes aren't wandering and you're, oh man, I don't know what I'll do when I get to that question. I don't know it. Focusing on the question in front of you one at a time. And another thing about focus is don't worry about the rest of the room. It's really easy to think, oh man, that's the chick that gets all the good grades and she's already done, or she's already flipped the page. Oh, listening for the page flip. It's just so frustrating. So frustrating. Because you can compare yourself, like, oh, they're getting through it faster, they must know more than I do. Well, then maybe not. Maybe they just work through things faster, or maybe they went with their gut answer, but their gut was wrong. There's those kind of things you want to keep in mind. So really, if you can mentally have it where I am the only person in this room, and this is the only question that matters, and trying to mentally block out everyone else. It's too bad you can't use like headphones, because I'm sure you're not allowed to, but it would be nice if you could do that and block out everybody around you, so that you can focus and not judging your pace versus the other people's pace. If you are reading a question and you're just like, I have a total knowledge gap here, I don't know, like move on. Don't try to keep figuring a question out when you could be moving on and making progress with our questions. And then go back to the ones that, okay, I'm going to get all the ones that I know for sure. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to work through those again. But sitting on question 6 for half an hour because you don't know it, puts you at not as great of a position to do the rest of them, because getting more frustrated and more frustrated and more frustrated staring at this question, when you could say, you know what, I don't know that, let me go to 7. And oh wait, I know 7. And it kind of builds up your confidence a little. And then you can go back with fresh eyes, also having read a whole bunch of other questions, and then able to go back. Something to keep in mind, a lot of these questions or exams have select all that apply and multiple choice. 2 totally different kinds of questions. Keep that in mind. And I like to compare it like, okay, in nursing school, multiple choice questions are not like, here's 4 incorrect answers, one of them's correct. That is not nursing school multiple choice. Here's 4 correct answers, which one's the most correct? So instead of it's not a black and white question. It's a gray question, I like to say. Here's 4 different shades of gray, which one's the darkest? So that if you can think of it like that, true and false questions are black and white. This is either correct or incorrect. And then there's multiple choices. You're trying to figure out what's the most appropriate, what's the priority. While these 4 things are priorities, what's the biggest priority? Those kinds of things. So if you can have that mentality when you're looking at multiple choice. But now let's move to select all that apply. A select all that apply question should take you much longer than a regular multiple choice. Do not get discouraged if you are working through it and it's taking you way longer and you're just, I should already be done with this. Let me pick this question. Don't do that. It should take you longer. If it's taking you longer to do a select all that apply, that means you're doing it right. Okay? Let me say that again. If it takes you longer to do a select all that apply, that means you're doing it right. Let's say it's got 6 options. That is not 1 question. That is 6 questions rolled into 1. So you have to look at each option like a true false. So cover up all the answers, read the question, understand what's being asked, and then cover up answer number 1 and turn it into a true false. Does blah, 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 true or false? And then answer that, then go to the next one, then go to the next one. And that way, that's how you should try to work through it, so you're not immediately frustrated when you can't get it right away, because those questions are very overwhelming. So if you can kind of look at them very differently, it'll hopefully set you up for success. And one of the really important things, I kind of mentioned it, is focus on answering specifically what the question is asking of you. Sometimes, the wording of the question is kind of confusing. And on top of that, the answers are answers to questions that aren't really being asked, if that makes sense. Right, Mac? Yeah. So, make sure you understand specifically what's being asked and getting at that answer and kind of forgetting about the distractors or the non-pertinent information. So those are my tips. Let me just review real quick. So the very, very practical: sleep well, eat well, and prepare well. That's point 1. When you get the test, write the important, really black and white memorization things at the top that you're like trying to memorize and remember for the test. Just write at the top. Do 1 question at a time. So cover everything up. Don't get distracted by what you're not actively looking at. Cover everything up and do 1 question at a time. Move on if you're stumped. Give yourself a little bit of time, but then move on if you're stumped. Take your time with select all that apply questions. Remember, those should take you a while to work through. Okay, we have a blog post, and I'll put the link of it in the description of this to how to systematically work through select all that apply. But go through those differently. And then the last one is to focus on answering specifically what is being asked, and that is it. Do not add different things or look at distractors or whatever. Answer only what is being asked. So those are my tips for kind of the mental thought process or tips for really getting through those really challenging nursing school exams. We understand, though, that school is a lot of fluff and like, what is the information I need to know for this test? So we created a whole bunch of resources for that. It's our little academy kind of thing where you pay a little monthly thing and you have access to tons of stuff, including NCLEX practice questions, tons of select all that apply, tons and tons of stuff. So check that out at nrsng.com/academy. Got a link to it at the bottom of this video. And I hope this helps you guys be more successful with nursing school exams in the future. Thanks, guys.